It's working, and we're live. Hey, welcome everybody. This is where Jill and Deb, Deb, usually welcome you to Humor, Grace, and Grief. And Jill is out doing something. She's at another conference presenting, and I am here with Debra Price. Do you like to go by Deb? It says Deb on there. So Deb Price. Deb and I have just been friends since we met each other in AATH, Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Yep. You're also part of World Laughter Tour, right?
I was, yeah.
You were, right. But you grew up in all these humor things.
Yes.
And then just recently, her and Jill presented at a humor conference dealing with, Jill's part was intimacy in the death and dying process. And yours was talking about saying out loud what happens when you die and plans you need to make. And look, here's her book, Love's Last Act. Pretty cool, huh? And so, Deb, what I'm going to do while we're here, as I reach down and I get on my other Facebook thing just to see who's doing what, I'm going to ask you all about, actually, before I ask you, I'm going to start at the end of the book because
the end is good.
Yeah, let's start at the end because we're talking about death and dying.
Okay.
It says, you envision growing a peaceful death revolution in which we all make our own fully informed choices as we contemplate and prepare for our inevitable death. Deb, this is great. How did you get into this? Tell me more, as they say.
Well, most people would say that I'm not very much of a radical person, but the older I get, the bolder I get. And as I have aged in my nursing career, I started as a pediatrics nurse a long, long time ago. And then I got my master's in gerontology because I was aging and I wanted to know more about how I would age. And that led me not only to being an oncology nurse, but also a hospice and palliative care nurse. And now I want, quote, my generation of the boomers to really take charge in a way that we have always taken charge. We changed everything because we were such a huge generation. Now I think it's time we changed that we change how we die. I like to be in control, and I'd rather not cede that control to the medical community as much as I love healthcare as a nurse. That's my milieu. But I want it to be my way and not the medical way, because in the end, we're all going to die. Even if we do all sorts of things, we can keep people alive pretty much for a long, long time. So that's not the life I want. I want to be able to talk with you, and I want to be able to eat and drink with you and celebrate. And if I can't do that, then I'd rather die. And so that's what I want us to all understand so that we can take the control back.
So when you say you don't want a medical way of dying, what do you mean?
I spent half of my nursing career in clinical research, and I loved it. And we are so reliant on the participants in research studies who agree. First we tell you, you have a life-threatening illness. Would you like to participate in a clinical trial? It may not benefit you, but the work that you do with us might benefit others who come behind you. I think that's heroic when people do that. And so I love that aspect of it. But often we don't want to tell the entire truth about medical conditions, what we're really talking about when we're talking about therapy, immunotherapy, all of the different therapies that we can give you, of what you're actually going to be put through, and what we're going to expect of you during that time. We don't have statistics on the effect of some interventions on older adults, because the clinical trials were done on people in their 40s and 50s. Well, if you're beyond that, if you're 60s or 70s, we've got nothing really, honestly, to talk to you about. We've got statistics of people who are much younger. Well, if we give you, you've got a 50-50 chance. Based on what? Based on the cohort that we studied. We don't have numbers for people who are 71. We don't know. But we're gonna quote you the numbers that we have, and then we're gonna cross our fingers and hope for the best.
So interesting.
I want it to be much more honest between healthcare professionals who really want. As a nurse, you want to help.
Right.
I want to make you feel better. And look, I've got this medicine. It could make you feel better. It also could make you really, really sick. And it's not going to save your life. It will prolong your life. But actually, I think in some cases, it's going to prolong your death instead. It's going I'd rather live a shorter life, but live it fully than,
that's, a lot of people think about that. And then when you're genuinely faced with stuff, like I know a few people, not a lot, that are in their stage 4+ cancer.
Right.
And one has since passed. That would be my cousin, Daryl's cousin. And it was so sacred to me that he included Daryl and I in the details. And in those details, because he lives in California, he was able to get interviewed in everything what they do for, it's not assisted suicide, but he is given the tools, how to, and he'll know when it's the end. And how humane that was. He made all the arrangements for everything, even went to a body farm. He donated it to a body farm where they get to, see how long bugs take to, I don't know, I'm making this up, but basically, and how interesting and how beautiful. He took control the way he wanted it, and his family went along with it. And to share those details with Daryl and I just meant everything to us, and sort of influenced and affirmed some things that I even learned about, I only have this much time. What am I going to do with it?
Exactly.
And my friend, I reposted something. He said, he lives in Louisiana, and I quoted him, Jimmy, and I said, I love that. We just rent this body, really.
Right.
So I gotta commend you for this. I wanted to ask you another question. So what made you want to write a book?
Well, I love to write. I've written poetry for pretty much all my life, written short stories. But at the AATH conference, with my good friend and your good friend Cheryl Fell, we were in a post session with Kelly Simmons, who is a book coach and has written her own book, and a book editor. And in the Q&A, Cheryl mentioned to all of us gathered there that she felt called to write a second book. She's already written her first book about the sunny side up, which is just wonderful, cheerful information. But she said, this time I'm called to write about hospice and palliative care. And I nearly fell out of my chair because I felt like that was a calling for me too. And so it took me several weeks to gin up my courage to ask Cheryl, have you ever thought of having a co-author? Can we do this together? And she said, yes. So that got me started. And then as the weeks and months, actually in the months before COVID, and then when COVID hit, we were writing away. And then Cheryl decided that she really needed to focus on her family business because they were an essential business during COVID. So, and then she gave me permission to just go ahead, keep going. And so by that time I was just having so much enjoyment out of getting my voice out there. And also I wanted to showcase some of the other authors who had published books ahead of mine, who are experts in the field. Dr. Gawande, I think his book on being mortal should be required reading for everyone who's going to die, which is pretty much everybody. So
yeah,
you know,
handbook to dying. Yeah.
So he and I really like his approach. He's very honest with his clients and the people that he serves. So I thought, you know what, I just have to get this off my chest. So I decided AATH, thank goodness for AATH, because AATH
it gets
made me who I am today.
Right. Kathy Keaton. Hi, Kathy. I sent her a bottle of chocolate wine I recommend to everybody, Wildwood Cellars. Not pushing anything though. But something else you wrote in here that another part is how you started the book. And you started the book with, before we talk about dying, let's talk about living, and living well. So I want to ask you, as you were writing, what are some of, like, name 3 key points, if you don't mind. Like, what is it about living well that helps you in making decisions about dying? Go ahead.
Well,
since I put you on the spot.
No, that's an excellent question. And I live in a community that is based on wellness. And I think that all of us really do need to focus on, we are in charge of our bodies and our minds. And there's so much we can do to be as healthy as we possibly can be, both in body, mind, and spirit. But we have to actually think about it and make conscious choices. Yes, I would like to have my two favorite food groups, basically coffee and chocolate. And I would love to live on just that, but that would not keep me healthy for very long. I think when I turn 80, I might just, switch
over. Sure.
Yeah. Eat dessert first, and then I'll see if I want the veggies later. But really focusing on, especially in aging, I want to keep moving. And because if you sit, if you rest, you start rusting. And I don't want to have creaky joints. And so walking in my community and going to our wellness classes, which are, everything from cardio dance moves to a spin bike class, those types of things. It's those are the things. Left to my own devices, I'm a closet exerciser, so I spend 20 minutes in the closet. But no. Now I go to a class that's an hour. But for me, it's social. All the other gals and guys who are there are trying to do exactly what I'm trying to do. Of kind of age is just a number, and mine is unlisted type of thing. No, age is, I'm going to be 69 on Tuesday, and I hope that I'm going to be 89 in 20 years. But I don't think that I'll get to 89 if I don't take care of this. So So those are the conscious choices that I'm making now. And then part of my conscious choices is, okay, what if I get diagnosed with something, you know, not what if, it's when I get diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, how am I going to approach that? For me, because I've spent half of my career in clinical research, I may, depending on the diagnosis, what particular part of my body is going awry, I may participate in a clinical trial, knowing that when it gets too much, if it gets too much, I can bow out of that trial and then seek hospice or palliative care. I do intend to live as long as possible, but in a very cheerful state. And if I have the golden opportunity, I do plan on having a wonderful farewell party where everybody wears.
I love it. I love it.
Red sponge noses are the essential wardrobe, and just, you know, tell me your favorite joke, tell me funny stories. Let's laugh. And so that when I do shift to the next room, beyond the veil, wherever, however you want to describe it, then I hope that people remember laughter through tears is one of my favorite emotions. And so I want to make very happy memories, because I've had a life that I never was supposed to have. And so, you know, I was born 3 months premature, weighed in 1952 at 2 pounds. And
wow.
So they, you know, they didn't expect me to live. Well, I've had one wonderful ride.
One joy ride. I love it. I love it.
Truly a joy ride. So so I think about all of those things. And of course, my family is going, Debbie, talk about death every single day. Well, because I want it to be part of the conversation, because it is part of the conversation. We start planning our kids' lives from the moment of conception. So when we stop before death, wait a second, let's talk about it, because it's a natural thing and it will happen. But I want it to happen the way you want it to happen, not the way we think it should go.
Right. You know, I as I was reading more in your book, and as I'm looking at some of my notes, hospice, people have a lot of misconceptions and expectations in hospice. And that, as I read in some of the grief groups, the nurses like myself jump in and say, hey, you got to call the nurse. We can't give you that information because, you know, Facebook police, well, I might write them privately and say a few things. But, you know, what are some of the misconceptions of hospice, and what can you expect from hospice? Can you talk about that in about a 5-minute time? I'm curious.
Yes, absolutely.
Even though I've been a hospice nurse and I work with hospice stuff, you talk about it.
Yes, well, I think that people think hospice is when you're right at death's door. Like, no, don't wait that long. Call hospice when you get diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, just to get more information about the services that are available to you, and the not only physical services, but the emotional counseling services that you might take advantage of. I hope that if I'm facing a life-threatening illness, that I get hospice services and I actually graduate from hospice several times before I finally succumb to the final illness that'll take me to the great beyond. One of my very favorite vignettes is Art Buchwald, who I thought was hilarious in his time, ended up going back and forth to hospice because he was in kidney failure, and he was able to have the care that he needed in hospice to the point where he graduated and no longer needed that kind of intense service, so that he actually went back home to his apartment in Washington, D.C., ended up doing that a couple of times. And then the third time around, he died in hospice services. And that to me just represents the way hospice and palliative care services are there and available to be used when you need them the most. Don't go into hospice and die the next day, because
I just want to say that happens a lot, and
too
part
often.
of that is the culture of the doctors treating them. And so who would know, and I'll write it in the comments in just a second, who would know that when you get your stage 4 cancer diagnosis, America's Got Talent, she just sort of graduated from hospice, and today she's cancer free, but she's been, and I'm like, who knows?
Right.
I mean, doctors don't say those. So how can we educate others to say, you've got this diagnosis? It's sort of like when you turn 60, actually, many times when you turn 55, you're eligible for AARP or whatever, and you can get a lot more discounts. So,
Yes.
you know what? Play that cancer card. Check in. You don't have to join them. You need a doctor's order to even be on hospice, but at least say, in case I need you.
Right.
And I just have to say, I get sort of frustrated, and I coach people. If you do research for your TV set in your car, you should be doing consumer economic magazine for yourself.
Yes.
And check this out. So continue while I write a note.
Yes, exactly. We take care of and we do research on so many things, but we rarely research, what about our own death? How are we going to approach that? Because and people say, well, you never can plan. You don't know how you're going to die. That's true. I don't know how I'm going to die. I would prefer dying on the dance floor, just upright 1 minute, face down the next. Likely not going to happen because my husband hates to dance. So I'm either out there on my own, which could be, but more than likely, the vast majority of us will face a final illness that will take a while. So how am I going to approach that final illness? And what am I willing to live with? And what am I willing or unwilling to live with? Mm-hmm. As you can tell, I like to talk. So don't put me on a ventilator. Ever. Never. And people are shocked at that. It's like, Dad, you can be off the ventilator in, 72 hours or something. It's like, I don't even want to be there at all, ever. I made that very clear in my notes to my family of, this is how mm-hmm. I am unable to tell you. This is what I expect. And I, never put me on a ventilator. If I fall over right now in this presentation, my husband will not grab 911 and, have me hauled off.
You got about 7 minutes, so don't fall over now. It would just eat up time.
But, so don't put me on a ventilator. And I like to eat. So I like to eat the normal way. I do not want a nasogastric tube, and I don't want a feeding tube in my stomach. I want to be able to eat. If I can't eat normally, then okay, I would rather die. I do like vehicles. So if I have to be using a wheelchair, make it motorized, so I can do wheelies around the corner, but that'll be my locomotion. That I can, mm-hmm. That's something that I can compromise with. That's mm-hmm. great. And, just as long as I can get around or that sort of thing. But that takes some time to contemplate. And it's
Right.
really hard to contemplate that if you were sitting in the ER with a life-threatening illness and the medical team is around you, doctors or nurses saying, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and your head is spinning because it's hard in the midst of an illness to tease all of that out. And we might be doing something for you that we think that you would love, like a ventilator, and no. Another thing is I don't ever want to be coded. I don't want heroic action. Do not try to start my heart again. Especially as I get older. It's one thing if I was 22, but not as I age, because the statistics for full recovery after a code in the hospital with older adults is far, far less than what we see on television with the hospital dramas of
Sure.
Then 17 minutes later they're walking out of the hospital. That doesn't happen.
As a nurse who watches those shows and corrects them, just saying.
Yes.
So there's something else that you wrote, and I'd like to talk about it for a couple minutes. We have about 5 minutes or so. So you wrote about two different things. There's advanced directives, and then there's something called PULSE, or physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. Can you sort of talk about the difference between PULSE and advanced directives?
Yes. Advanced directives, of course, we've had in existence for a long time. That's not only the decisions that you want at the end of your life, but then you're designating somebody to speak for you and make those decisions for you if you can't do that. That is a legal document. And of course, when you go into the hospital, they will ask you if you have a do not resuscitate order, and can give you paperwork right there, and they will have that done. Sometimes, at least in the during my career as a nurse, I have seen medical teams be caught off guard by someone having a cardiac arrest. And even though they might have a DNR, we go ahead and resuscitate them. I don't want that to happen. The legal form isn't as powerful as the doctor's order, which is what the physician order for life-sustaining treatment is. It was a movement that began on the West Coast, Oregon and Washington, and kind of swept across the country over the last decade and a half. And that is where it's very similar to a DNR. It's a cardstock, brightly colored paper. It is state by state. It is a state document, but it is something that you fill out with your physician. And so physician orders rule in hospitals. And so you won't have the event of, we're overriding this, we're going to do a cardiac and we're going to resuscitate you. And that usually isn't the patient that's talking, it's their parents, if it's a younger person, or a spouse saying, do something. And so we'll do something, we will resuscitate you. No. So the PULSE just become my very favorite thing, because it requires a number of conversations to really fill out specifically what you want in a very detailed way. But as it turns out, then it's a two-sided cardstock, so it's right there. And we as a medical team or the healthcare team will know exactly what you designated when you were of sound mind and could communicate with us. So I like that so much better. I like both. If you have the opportunity to have both. The PULSE, however, is specifically for those who already have a life-threatening illness or who are very frail due to ancient age. So it's not, I mean, I have a PULSE because I I insisted on it. And I was also a trainer to have people fill out the post. So I needed to have that as my, this is my sign. This is what I want. So let's talk about what you want.
So I want to ask one quick question about post, and then I have one more question that maybe I'll sum up in the broadcast. The question I have about post is, what age can you have post?
It's not so much age driven as whether or not you have been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness.
So a teenager, someone under the age of 18, could actually have post.
Yes.
That they've worked it out. Would their parents be able to accept that, or do they take it to the court? I think I saw this on TV recently. That's why I'm asking.
Hopefully the parents, because and someone under the age of 18 would need to have their parents sign, co-sign. So in that sense, and the conversation would be with the family about, first of all, what does the person with the life-limiting illness want? And if they're 16 years old, you need your mom and dad in this conversation too. But it could be a family thing. And it always should, no matter how old we are, our loved ones need to be aware, need to be part of that conversation, so that you don't get into the whole, brothers versus sisters. I don't want to do this to dad. I want to do this to dad, that kind of thing. Or, but especially parents to children who are below the legal age. But yes.
So thank you for saying how parents have to get involved and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Lastly, how do you think humor plays into your expression and talking about death and dying? What do you think? How do you think humor or laughter, or what is it? However you want to answer that question.
Well, I want to die laughing. Mary Poppins was one of my very favorite films when I was a kid, and Uncle Edwin, or I can't even remember.
Oh, yeah.
Mary Poppins' uncle literally died laughing, and that impressed me then, and it still does. I hope that I will have the opportunity to die with a smile on my face. Well, in order to do that, I want to have the wherewithal to be able to still tell funny stories and have people share laughter with me. Because I've seen so often in hospice, funny things come up, even in the darkest times. And like our friend Karen Buxman, who has great stories of her mom's final illness with dementia and how they coped with it. And, should I buy this? If I buy this tube of toothpaste, do you think that I will still be around to finish this tube of toothpaste? And they laughed about it, and things like that, just to, even in the darkest times, I find laughter to be so healing, that we still can laugh. My father-in-law went into hospice, and staunch Republican. But at the end, he was having trouble being comfortable. I could tell, and so the hospice nurse and I repositioned him on his left side, and so I bent down and just whispered in his ear. I said, "I won't tell your son, my husband. I won't tell your son that you really are more comfortable on the left." And he chuckled. He chuckled, and that was his last breath. So he died laughing. And I loved to be able to bring that kind of humor to him, because because we always talked politics. That's part of the family, you know. And I just thought that, okay, let's lighten it up here. And he went with it, and then he actually went. So that's trying to, you know, I'm hoping that I would like to have other people die laughing, and if I can be part of that, yay! I've done my job as a hospice nurse.
Wow, Deb. Thank you for this time together. Kathy Westgate Keaton was watching and listening, and she said, "Great information, Deb. I've ordered the book."
Yes.
Yeah, and Terry Corrales, I'm not saying your last name correctly, Terry, but he said a post is required in California for hospital and home care patients. It's bright pink and usually on the fridge so the EMTs can find it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, good for California. Let's start the movement. I hope it comes across the country because there's so many states who are in various levels, you know.
Right.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
So we've had a few listeners, and then hopefully you'll repost this and I'll repost it. And I just want to say thank you for being on Humor, Grace, and Grief today, and being part of the movement to not be afraid to be in that uncomfortable place, but be there with grace, be there with kindness, be there, just be there is the operative word. So thank you, Deb. I knew I loved you before. I love you even more.
Ditto. Ditto.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. And at the same time, same place with Jill will be here. And I know we're going to be having some guests pretty soon. I apologize. She sort of schedules those things. So anyway, thanks again, Deb Price. And thanks all who joined us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Deb.